After the 1860 presidential election and the secession of 7 southern states by February 1861, civil war in the United States seemed inevitable. In his March 4, 1861 Inaugural Address, President Lincoln pleaded with the southern states for a peaceful resolution to the secession crisis. He concluded his inaugural address with the following remarks: "In your hands, my dissatisfied fellow countrymen, and not in mine, is this momentous issue of civil war. The government will not assail you. You cannot have no conflict without being yourselves the aggressors. You have no oath registered in heaven to destroy the government, while I shall have the most solemn one to preserve, protect, and defend it. I am loath to close. We are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. The mystic cords of memory stretching from every battlefield and patriot grave to every living heart and hearthstone all over this broad land will yet swell with the chorus of the Union, when again touched, as surely they will be, by the better angels of our nature." But this eloquent plea was rejected on April 12, 1861, when Confederate forces fired on Fort Sumner in Charleston, South Carolina. With the surrender of the fort the next day, the American Civil War had officially begun. Both sides had hoped for a quick war. However, the bloody battles of 1861 and early 1862 proved that it would be anything less. With this new stark reality, attitudes in the North and among some of the U.S. Army leaders regarding African American soldiers began to change. Some states, like Kansas and Massachusetts, passed legislation that allowed for the recruitment of free African Americans who wanted to volunteer and fight. Finally, the United States Congress acted by passing the Confiscation Act, which freed slaves from owners who were in rebellion against the United States, and the Militia Act of 1862 empowered the President to use former slaves in any capacity in the Army. At first, President Lincoln was reluctant to use African Americans as soldiers and limited the Army and Navy to only using them as paid laborers. However, the African American state troops were proving themselves in the field, and more Army commanders were willing to use them. Political and military leaders lobbied the President and Congress to create units so that African Americans could fight in the U.S. regular Army. Frederick Douglass urged, "Once let the black man get upon his person the brass letter U.S. Let him get an eagle on his button and a musket on his shoulder and bullets in his pocket, and there is no power on earth or under the earth which can deny that he has earned the right of citizenship in the United States." After the Emancipation Proclamation went into effect January 1, 1863, recruitment of freemen and former slaves began in full force by states and some military units. In May 1863, the War Department established the Bureau of Colored Troops to facilitate the recruitment of African American soldiers. Infantry, cavalry, engineers, light artillery, and heavy artillery regiments were now being filled in the United States regular Army. However, the right to fight came with limitations for African Americans who wanted to wear the U.S. uniform. Their units would be segregated, and the officers that led them would be white. At first, they were paid less than white soldiers. They often faced prejudice and discrimination, but still they fought and proved that they were just as good as any other soldier. About 186,000 African Americans, both free men and former slaves, fought with 175 United States colored troop regiments, constituting about 1/10 of the manpower of the Union Army. In addition, 20,000 served in the Union Navy, and around 40,000 died serving in the U.S. military during the Civil War. African American troops fought in 40 major battles and hundreds of more minor skirmishes. 16 African Americans received the Medal of Honor. Sergeant William Harvey Carney, a former slave with the 54th Massachusetts Volunteer Infantry, was with his unit when it stormed Fort Wagner in Charleston, South Carolina on July 18, 1863. When the flag bearer went down, he retrieved the U.S. flag and marched forward with it, despite serious wounds. When the unit was ordered to retreat, he struggled back across the battlefield, returning to camp, never having let the flag touch the ground. For his actions that day, he would be the first African American to receive the Medal of Honor. In Arkansas, 5,526 African Americans, most of them former slaves, served in the Union Army during the war. In total, they fought in 29 battles and skirmishes, including notable battles at Helena, Prairie du Chien, Poison Spring, Camden, and Jenkins Ferry. During the Civil War, African Americans had proven skeptics wrong, and not only fought well, but helped pave the way for the ending of the Civil War and slavery for all time. After the war, 4 regiments of infantry and 2 cavalry units consisting of all African Americans were activated in the U.S. Army. However, prejudices and racism remained, and the units were segregated from the rest of the white military units. The 2 cavalry units would gain fame fighting out west and were nicknamed Buffalo Soldiers because Native Americans compared their hair to the curly fur of bison. African Americans who fought in the Civil War paved the way for future generations to serve in the armed forces. Although they had to serve in segregated units until 1948, African Americans have served and fought honorably in the United States military.